Hey everybody, welcome to my room. Today we're going to be talking about Man of Steel.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound, this amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel, Superman.
Superman's come a long way since the 1940s Fleischer cartoons or his debut 75 years ago in Action Comics #1. But a few things still hold true to the character, and that's his sense of truth, justice, and upholding what's right in this world. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel is a modern-day take on the Man of Tomorrow, in the vein of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. I think it needs to be pointed out that even though Nolan helped him with the script and kind of produced the movie and all that, Zack Snyder deserves a round of applause for making a Superman movie as enjoyable as this one. Superman's a very difficult character to adapt, and today we're going to look at a few reasons why. Like Batman, Superman is a loner hero, orphaned at a young age, and who's dedicated to, fighting crime, saving the world, that kind of thing. The biggest difference between him and Batman, however, is that Superman has the abilities of a god, and Batman's pretty much man-made. Self-made man, rather. This is the dynamic that makes Superman interesting to watch, but difficult to adapt. He could easily turn on people of Earth at any time and rule us with an iron fist. He chooses not to. He chooses to use his powers for the greater good. He trusts that people will follow his example. And he accepts that his choices have consequences. And these are the three major themes that I noticed running through Man of Steel, both times I saw it. We're actually going to take a look at them individually today. Choice seems to be the most prevalent theme of the three. Kal-El is the first child of Krypton in centuries to be given a choice in his life's work. Clark spends his adolescence trying to figure out what kind of man he wants to be, and ultimately decides he needs to be a good one. The question of why he chooses to be a hero rather than a villain has been the focal point of a lot of stories over the years, but I believe essentially it all comes down to one reason, and that's his parents. This is one of the biggest things Man of Steel has going for it. Jor-El's presence in this story is much more prominent than in previous tales, and Jonathan Kent has always kind of served as Clark's moral compass, both in the comics and in several live-action adaptations of Superman, most recently Smallville. The movie shows a different side of Jonathan Kent, though, and I couldn't be happier about it. He gives Clark a choice. He tells him, whatever man you're going to be, he's going to change the world. You're going to be a good guy or you're going to be a bad guy. And I love seeing that. It's so nice to see that side of the character. This is most driven home, I think, in the scene after Clark saves a school bus full of his classmates that we see in trailer 2, actually. John just says, you have to keep this side of yourself a secret. Clark says, well, what was I supposed to do? Let him die? And this is something I love. The first time I saw this trailer, I about flipped my shit when this happened because it was so cool to see. Jonathan Kent just kind of looks and goes, maybe. And it's so cool to see that he's actually, telling Clark that sometimes you have to make a sacrifice in order to allow, yourself to remain hidden, in order to keep the lives of your family and friends safe. And that actually comes into play a lot later in the movie, so it's really cool to kind of see this, little foreshadowing of it. I think the scene that really drives home the trust between Clark and Jonathan the most is when we find out how he died. There's this tornado, all these cars, all these people were trapped in it basically, and what happens is Jonathan Kent saves all the people. He gets a bunch of people out of the cars, he sends them over, to the overpass to hide, be sheltered from the tornado. But he gets injured in the process. His leg gets crushed and he can't walk. And Clark wants to save him. Clark starts to make a move to save him, and John just stops him. And Clark stops. And then the tornado rolls in, and that's it. That's the last we see of Jonathan Kent, And Clark even says in the movie, I let my father die to show that I trusted him, And it's just kind of this great theme of, is the world ready for Superman, Clark needs to make the choice eventually of whether or not he wants to come out as Superman or as this being with powers or whatever. But what's the world going to do when they find out? Earlier I mentioned that Kal-El was conceived so that he would have the choice of how to live his life. If you've seen the movie, you know that the children of Krypton are essentially grown to fulfill a set role in society. What I like about this, actually, is that it gives Zod kind of a reason for his actions, aside from just, he's the evil General Zod. Everything Zod does, he does with that goal in mind. He kind of really doesn't have a say in the matter. What's nice about this though is it kind of gives us a reason to say, okay, we get why he's doing it, but it doesn't make him overly sympathetic. You know, you don't feel bad for him or anything like that. It's just he is doing what he's doing because he cares about his people essentially, and he has no choice. And I love that it worked so well in this movie, you know, and it gives Superman a reason to absolutely just pound the crap out of him, which is something we haven't seen in a whole lot of Superman movies for some reason. Action. So that was definitely nice to throw that in there. Well, I love Michael Shannon. He's a great actor. Seeing him as Zod was incredible. On that note as well, Russell Crowe's Jor-El was really good in this movie, I thought. One thing I do love about the movie is there's a few scenes with Zod and Jor-El at the same time. I love those so much. Watching Zod and Jor-El kind of battle out their differences, you know, arguing about what's the right way to go about saving Krypton is just a great thing to watch. I loved it so much. It's cool because that's kind of another great thing that's, you know, or another thing about those two characters is, you know, Zod's a soldier, Jor-El's a scientist, and they both have the same goal in mind. They want to save Krypton and they want to save its people, but they can't agree on how to do it. You know, Zod wants to destroy Earth and change it into a new Krypton, whereas Jor-El wants to use Superman or use Kal-El to be the bridge between two people. I can honestly say, after having seen this movie twice, I would watch a movie with just Zod and Jor-El, just kind of not even necessarily fighting, just debating the principles of their viewpoints because they just both acted that well in the movie. I loved it. My only minor complaint, as far as the first act of the movie goes, is really not enough Diane Lane. I really wish we would have gotten to see more of Clark with his mother. What I always liked about it is, you know, Pa Kent's always the moral support, and Clark's mother is always the emotional support. And I just feel like this movie needed a little bit more of interaction between Clark and Martha. Trust is another big thing we see a lot of in this movie. Basically, Clark, once he grows up, we're shown that he's never in one place for too long. He kind of drifts from town to town. He saves lives, does what he does, you know, and then leaves because he can't afford to be found out at all. He's not a very trusting person because his father raised him to believe that people likely won't be able to handle the idea that there's this being out there, that there's an alien who has these powers. It isn't really until Clark meets Lois that we see him trust anyone or open up to anyone, and it's in this aspect that the Clark-Lois relationship is most changed from its original versions. Generally speaking, what happens is Lois, you know, meets Clark. Clark falls for Lois. Lois falls for Superman. Then eventually realizes she loves Clark and finds out they're the same person. But basically, she falls for both of them at the same time. So she finds out his secret like right away. That's the first thing that we have in their relationship. There's none of this, you know, will she find out? Won't she find out? Back and forth banter. She finds out right away, and that definitely is a very strong point for the movie. That she kind of encourages Clark to step forward and reveal to the world who he really is. Um, when she does encourage that, he's still not really ready to do that. He doesn't want to, but it's at the same time that Zod appears and kind of forces Clark's hand, demands that he step forward, reveal himself as Kal-El, or they're going to start killing humans. Um, and I believe Superman even says it in the movie, you know, he's really glad that Lois didn't publish the story, didn't follow through on her leads or anything like that. And she says it didn't make much of a difference. And he says it did to me. That's cool because it just kind of shows that she was his first step into trusting people and being able to, you know, realize that perhaps they can't handle the fact that he's here now. Also, I want to say that the second act of the movie is where I noticed the casting really starts to shine. You really start to see how great everybody is. Obviously, Amy Adams' Lois Lane was amazing. She's not quite as like, I don't know, spunky as I'm used to. I'm really used to the Erica Durance version from Smallville and the Terry Hatcher version from Lois and Clark, sadly enough. Uh, but Amy Adams does a great job as Lois Lane. Definitely ideal casting in that part. Lawrence Fishburne does a great job as Perry White. He's definitely more of the fatherly type in this movie. He's a little bit more stoic, but I really love that about him. He's not quite as like J. Jonah Jameson, you know, from Spider-Man. He's kind of like Morpheus, actually. Morpheus is Perry White. So that's really cool. Michael Kelly is Steve Lombard. I love Michael Kelly. I am not familiar with a whole lot of his work, but what I have seen him in, he's done a great job. If you're ever looking for another good movie with him in it, I definitely recommend it. Anyways, check out Defendor. It's also got Woody Harrelson, Elias Koteas, and Kat Dennings. 2 thumbs up on that movie, but we're talking about Man of Steel right now, so back to that movie. Oh, another quick thing too. Feora, the actress that plays Feora, did an amazing job. I would try and pronounce the actress's name, but that's just going to be a horrible, horrible butchering of her name. But keep it up, Feora. Now, one of the final themes we see in this movie is consequence. The big choice Clark has to make in this movie is whether or not to trust people, and he knows that there's going to be consequences either way. If he chooses not to trust people, Zod's going to start killing them. If he does choose to trust them, who knows what's going to happen. We kind of get to see how both Kal-El and Zod have to deal with Jor-El's choices. They both have to deal with the consequence of one of the choices he made, and that choice was to imbue Clark's DNA with the Kryptonian Codex. So basically, Clark has the DNA of a million people or a billion people, whatever, in his blood cells, which is awesome. So it's cool to see that there's a conflict here at the movie that neither of them really had a say in. Basically, Superman has to deal with it just by being himself, putting his faith in humans, and doing what he can to keep them alive. Whereas Zod doesn't handle it too well, and he tries to kill fucking everyone. One other thing that was really cool here that happened as a result of this was in the final battle, Zod is, he makes it clear that he's not going to stop, ever. He's always going to be trying to kill these people and convert Earth into New Krypton. And Superman doesn't see any other way out, so he snaps Zod's neck. He kills Zod, which was kind of a shocking moment for me. I didn't really expect to see that because Superman's not known for his brutality. But from what I remember, he's never taken like an oath on not killing people. I mean, he tries not to do it, obviously, but he doesn't have a code like Batman does as far as that's concerned. So I really didn't have a problem with that. Some people apparently did have a problem with him killing because they think it's completely out of character, which I guess, if that's how you feel, then that's fine. I'm not going to judge you for that. But I don't see any problem with it. He had no other choice but to kill. So he did what he had to do. I think one other thing I just noticed the second time I watched it actually was there's a lot of similarities between the scene where Jonathan Kent dies and the scene where Clark kills Zod. Basically, the scene where John dies, Clark and Jonathan are in a fight about whether or not Clark should step forward and show the world what he really is. And then the tornado happens, and John saves a bunch of civilians and tells Clark not to reveal himself, and because of that, Jonathan Kent dies. Whereas with Zod forced Clark out in the open. He called him on his abilities. He forced him out. He's killing people, and then now instead of making the choice on whether or not to allow him to live and trust him, Superman has to make the choice of whether or not to kill him. But it's kind of cool because one thing I did notice was that he reacts the same way both times. After he watches Jonathan Kent die, he screams, as you probably would if you watched your father die that way too. But after he kills Zod, he screams as well. Makes it seem like he's upset that he couldn't save Zod just the same way he didn't save his father. Overall, this movie is just friggin' awesome. I highly recommend it to anybody. Definitely go see it if you like Superman. If you like comic books, definitely go see it. If you're not big into Superman, probably still go see it anyways, because it's just a good movie all around. It'll get you into the character. It's got a lot of action. It doesn't let up. Good story. It's very well written. Highly recommend it. I'd say easily 8 out of 10. Definitely go see this movie. You're gonna love it. Please feel free to comment on what you thought about the movie. Like the video. Subscribe to my channel for more reviews. Share the video. Anything is appreciated. Thank you very much for watching.